Thank you once again, Internet, for joining me to talk all things vertical acting in the movie business. I am very happy to introduce a rather brilliant actress who is new on the vertical scene but made a big impact with her first role, and that is Kate Krieger. So I'm going to ask Kate to tell you all a little bit about herself and her background.
Sure. You want specifically my background with verticals or just in general?
Just generally, just like if you met someone at a party, Kate, what would you say? How would you introduce yourself?
Okay, well, I'm from Los Angeles. And I went to school in Boston and at Lambda in London, and so I clearly like to travel, and I think that's all very much a part of me being an actress, is that I'm very interested in other people, in other cultures, and I'm just generally very curious. And I've also written professionally, and I love acting, I think, more than anything. I think I really like storytelling and characters. So that's a very brief gist.
Going back to when you were a kid, do you remember like the first stories that caught your imagination and that you wanted to tell?
I have this one story. It's going to come across potentially very boring, but I'm going to tell. It's not long, so that's a good thing. And I share this with people when they want to know, how did you know you wanted to be an actress? And looking back, I couldn't articulate that at the time. I was too young, but now I can, which was my brother, who's a little older than I am, had a friend whose mother was Southern. She's from Georgia. And I remember going over to their house with my mom to pick my brother up. And my mom got in a conversation with this little boy's mother. And I just remember, it was really petite. And I'm looking up at her. I'm probably about 8 or 9 years old. And I was fascinated by her outfit. She had on, it's the 90s, she had on a matching windbreaker, and she had this like shock of red hair and a Southern accent and a little piece of gum. It was kind of like an afterthought in the back of her mouth that she chewed while she talked. And so as a kid, I just sort of, for lack of a better way of saying it, like soaked all of that in and was riveted by that. And I think it was just indicative of my interest in characters, in people that didn't talk like me or move like me or dress the way I did. And so that was how it manifested. And also, I loved the movies. I loved romance, and I loved the escapism of them. And I probably, as a kid, was very interested in things that were movies that were like far too precocious for me, but I loved them, and I loved things that, this is still true about myself, I was very much an old soul, if that makes sense. I loved things with 60s music and that took place in the 60s, and things that were shot on the East Coast, because I grew up in Los Angeles. It was wildly different aesthetically from where I lived and what I knew. So I think all of that was very much a part of loving stories, loving characters, and just being curious. Yeah.
Do you remember some of the movies, the ones that you rewatched and rewatched?
Oh my God, yeah. Well, my favorite movie is a film called Mermaids, which is with Cher.
I'm old enough to know mermaids.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Yeah, so good.
It's so good. And I mean, I could tell you every cue, every musical cue, and what Cher's wearing and which scene and what song's playing. And oh my God, Mermaids is one. And then also, I loved Brad Pitt, so I'd watch Legends of the Fall when I was probably way too young to watch it.
Legends of the Fall, yes. Yes. I always liked Aidan Quinn.
Oh, Aidan is such a babe. Total smoke. Yeah, total smoke.
Love that man so much. I'll watch anything he's in. I just think he's brilliant.
Yeah. Yes. He was a hottie.
She had a hard time in that, didn't she, Julia Ormond?
Say that again?
She had a hard time in that, Julia Ormond.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, Brad Pitt. Oh, Aidan Quinn. Oh, it's so hard.
I know. Oh my God, so many babes. And Brad, I had a poster on my wall of him for ages from Legends of the Fall. So I watched that, and then I love the movie Big. I think it's a wonderful film. I think so I coach actors when I'm not on a gig, and I always tell them, especially people that are new to the game, watch a film like Big, because it covers all the bases insofar as there's a perfect character arc. every actor in it is terrific, and they're playing fully fleshed out characters. They're all very committed. Beautiful score as well. I think it's an unbelievably well executed film, and especially for a film that I think if somebody pitched that premise to you in an elevator, they'd go, huh? You know, but it totally works. So Big was one, When Harry Met Sally, Dances with Wolves. I mean, things that, yeah.
We have so similar taste.
Oh, we got to talk off the record.
Dances with Wolves. Oh, yeah. Right. Yes, we could get distracted here, but that's really interesting what you say about Big. About yeah, you can see that. Yeah, it's not an easy pitch, but it does work, and people
Yeah,
love
well,
that movie, don't they? And rewatch, and
totally, and it's
all
a
my kids
testament
love
to
it.
him.
So.
Yeah, it well, it's. I mean, obviously they ended up making 13 going on 30, and that all tracked because people had seen Big. But I don't know. I would think, that movie came out in 1988. I would just be curious what the conversation looked like prior to getting it greenlit. And Hanks is just so endearing and so good and funny and moving, and just he's a brilliant movie star.
So that's really helpful knowing that these things inspired you. And then you mentioned travel as well. So what was the story about deciding to go to Lambda in London?
Well, I always, even as a really little kid, I fantasized a lot about, like I said, just places, people, and things that were a bit foreign to me, if that makes sense. And I don't necessarily mean literally out of the country, but just unlike what I knew. And my mom's from the East Coast, and she's not an actress, but she happens to be a very good storyteller and has had a very interesting life, very, very different from my own. And so hearing her stories about growing up on the East Coast and, the years that she came of age, I was always very interested and very inspired by what she told me, and also just going back east with her as a kid and my family as a kid, that inspired me to get out of Southern California and travel for school. So without giving you every last detail, basically I got into Boston University, and that's where I started, and it was very, very different from what I'd grown up with. And then long story short is I wanted to transfer, and I'm very interested in language as well. And at that point, I'd never been out of the country. So I went to a program at the University of Salamanca in Spain, which I just loved every minute of. It was just heaven for me. And then I had a very circuitous route, but I ended up coming back to Los Angeles, and I'd always had this itch to go to drama school and to work as an actor. And I think I was kind of dodging it because it's not realistic, and it's hard, and it's unpredictable, and it's daunting and all that. And I just, thank God I was able to sort of quiet that fear, and I got into a program at Lambda, and I went. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I got to study clown and Shakespeare and Alexander technique, and I got to be in this incredible city and meet some wonderful people, some of whom I still talk to. And it was all, I think, very much a part of this, I'll probably have it for as long as I live, this like a constant yen to explore and to dig into other places. And quite honestly, and I tell this to people I work with that I'm coaching, is some of the best training and research you can do, I think, is just availing yourself to opportunities. And what that often looks like is if you can travel. If you can go to school somewhere that feels maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone, but it seems exciting, do it, talk to people, engage people. It's always weird to me when actors are super self-involved. I'm like, you got to take an interest in things outside of you, in my opinion, to be interesting, So, yeah.
Do you think that's even more of a challenge now, kind of post-COVID, and obviously so much is that you can do it all from home? Because, you can self-tape from home, you can audition from home. It's like,
yeah.
But actually, it's the magic possibly comes from getting out, as you said, into the world, interacting, seeing people, observing having experiences, having the opportunities.
Yeah. I think you make a good point. Obviously all of this was very much pre-COVID, of course. But that is an issue. And I think it's not just COVID, it's the phones too. We're so, and I'm guilty of this as well. I'm not immune to this. I'm totally addicted to my phone. But I think and I was watching, I can't remember who it was, but somebody talking about acting. I saw some YouTube clip of it or whatever, and she just said, yeah, part of our work is training and being prepared and being on top of things, but the other part of it is the decompression, right? So the getting out in nature, literally just getting outside, going to an event that's not going to network or make you money, but it's something that might feed your soul, honestly. And so I think, yes, COVID definitely has, thrown a wrench in some of that. But it just means you have to make it part of, I think, your routine as a person and as an actor to force yourself to take yourself kind of on, artist dates, as Julia Cameron talks about in The Artist's Way. It's like,
That's the book.
yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah.
It's a great book. And oh my gosh, she says so many just sort of spot on, very poignant things. And so you have to make it part of, as much as you submit yourself for work or take people for coffee or nudge your agents, you've also got to feed water that well, as it were. You know what I mean? So you got to make a point to do it.
And actually, I would say that's really good life advice as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm nodding along going, yeah, I'm not watering my well at the moment, so thank you. I will do that.
Yeah, because it helps everything. I mean, and I, touched on this a little bit, but so much of the work that I've written and the characters that I've built, they're amalgams really of experiences I've had, of people I've met, of cities I've lived in. Yeah, I've got an active imagination because that's how I'm wired, but I don't know that I would have been able to create them without those experiences. So get off your phone, and get moving. I don't know, get outside.
And it's really helpful that you mentioned about creating and writing characters, because I do want to mention, and obviously I try and do a little bit of research. Yeah. And obviously you wrote, directed your, is it short movie? I looked into what it was that was basically went to Sundance.
It did. It was
huge, and it's really interesting that you said that it was that character was something that you sort of had developed from quite early on.
That's correct. So to answer your question, I originally shot it as a short. I wrote it as a short. So I wrote a feature, and then I adapted the feature into a short, just because I knew a short financially would be much easier to make. And to that end, writing a short pulled from a feature can be far more daunting than writing the feature because you don't have a lot of real estate, So I had this character that it was, like I said, she was a hybrid of people, places, things that I'd experienced. And I wrote it as a short, shot it as a short, and then it ended up getting into Sundance, but my producer, Lindsay Lanzalotta, I credit her with this. She said, you have so much material beyond just this piece. We should submit this in the episodic program. And so we did, and we got in, and it was like, what? Because, you make these things out of love, and it's all blood, sweat, and tears, and I had so many meltdowns, Jen. Like, I was a wreck, and wanted to give up at times and had a lot of tears. And I'm so glad I stayed the course, because so many people say they're going to do something or create something and they never do it. And I did it without knowing that anything would come out of it other than the joy and the reward of completing something, to starting it and finishing it, which I had a hard time doing when I was younger. I had a lot of perfectionism, and I had a hard time seeing things through as a result. As an adult, I've really tried to change my conversation around that,
That's phenomenal that you did it. And yeah, I would agree. I do quite a lot of business and entrepreneur stuff, and that's something that a lot of the top entrepreneurs say. key thing is actually doing it. Loads of people have a great idea, which I
Yeah.
imagine is similar with acting and, you know, directing, writing. Loads of people have a great idea, but have you actually done it, written it, finished it, got it out there?
Yeah, so that's why, like, you know, even if you make something and it feels mediocre, who cares? You did it, you know, screw it. Just keep creating is what I would say. And I have to listen to my own, you know, what I have to walk the walk too, because there's still things that I've shelved, and I'm like, just come on, you know. So it's not easy.
This happened in 2019, and then we all know what happened in 2020, which obviously put a spoke in a lot of work for a lot of people. For people who don't quite understand, could you explain sort of the impact that that's been on the acting industry, sort of COVID and then the strikes afterwards?
Just like what, in terms of how COVID affected things?
Yeah, and just the strikes and just basically,
Yeah.
I guess, the scene and kind of, you know, what it is like for someone who's trying to make a living as an actor and sort of where the work is now.
Yeah, I mean, look, COVID, I'll say this, that on a personal level, the good news was that COVID led me to coaching. So because production was shut down and the world was essentially shut down, you know, we had to get resourceful. And so I started coaching classes virtually, which then sort of segued into my private coaching, which has been, to date, the most fulfilling side job that I've ever had. It's incredibly rewarding at times. It's not always easy, but it's rewarding, and I get to be teaching something I love, right? Versus doing a side gig that for me feels sort of meaningless. And then obviously with the strikes, I mean, that was a rough patch for everybody, you know, and the people I felt, quite honestly, the worst for was the crew. Because the thing is, you can technically, if you're a writer or an actor, you can keep creating. You don't really need other people to do it. Sure, ultimately you want to collaborate and you need a team, but I can still, and I would do this literally, just make character videos, and I could fill that void, right? You know, gaffers and dolly grips, they didn't really have that option, and on top of which they weren't generating an income. So my hat goes off to them, and God knows if you work on any set, the crew, they're the unsung heroes. They work their butts off. But it was rough, but I will say this, I can't speak for everybody, because of the strike in SAG, it just allowed me to do theater. And that was great. So I started doing, I really hadn't done any stage work since not long after Lambda. So it had been a number of years. And I booked a gig not long after COVID, but when the strike was happening, a theater gig. And then that, you know, work begets work. And I think my interest in theater, it was kind of like I was putting it out there, and I started applying for more theater jobs, and I started getting them. And so I was working in New York quite a bit doing theater, and I love that. So that was for me a benefit, but it was rough. And I would say, like, you know, sometimes take the strike out of it, take COVID out of it, there's lulls. There's periods of time when I'll hear other actors say, it's really slow, or God, I'm not getting out at all, you know? And that is the nature of what we do. So I'm of the opinion that, like, I know for me, if I don't have a purpose or something to get me up in the morning, that ain't good for my mental health. Yeah. So you can't, it's really hard, but you can't rely on outside sources to give you the work and to give you creative fulfillment. You've got to be self-generating, you know. I hope that answers the question. I know.
No, that does. That's really, really helpful, and I think it's just good advice for everyone, and particularly for people who are coming from vertical dramas, to kind of understand then that this thing that comes along called vertical drama, sort of why it has had the impact that it's had. So, had you heard of them at
Verticals?
all? Yeah, had you heard of
Yes.
sort of short dramas or mobisodes or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what was your feeling? What had you been told?
Can I
Be honest, it's fine.
Well, I was familiar with them only because two reasons. One, because of the coaching. I had read with a number of actors that were auditioning for roles in them, and they were so soapy, the material, and over the top and outrageous. I went, what is this? And they go, there's this thing called a vertical, and I didn't know what that meant. And then I did a staged reading a little over a year ago at a theater in Studio City in Los Angeles, and one of the actors in it started telling me that he had done all these verticals and they were his bread and butter. I mean, that's how he was staying afloat. And at the time, I didn't think they were an option for me because I'm a SAG actor, but and most of these sounded like they were non-union. And if I'm being totally honest, I also thought this material, like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But without getting into all the boring details, they did a contract for me, which is why I was able to do this particular gig. And I think there will probably be a turning of the tide because they're so popular now where it will incorporate far more union actors. But yeah, that was it. I'd heard about them and read some of the sides, but that was it. I'd never done one.
So can you tell me how you came about to have the role of Beth Hart then?
Yeah, like how I submitted and all that.
Yep.
Well, and this is a good thing for people that are maybe a little bit green as actors, even if you have representation, I'm of the mindset that you should be hustling no matter what. There's a reason they take 10%, right? We make 90% of anything they help us with because we're doing most of the legwork. So that should be true all the time. And I submitted on Backstage, not knowing it was a vertical, seeing just a brief breakdown in character specs, and it said union and non-union, so I thought, great. And I related to some of the character description of Beth, not all of it, but some of it. And I wrote a little cover letter. Backstage allows you to do that, and I think it's always kind of a nice touch. They called me in. And by called me in, I mean asked me to submit a tape. So this is what I was going to tell you, is that for people that have seen at least the first, 9 episodes, they'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, not a big deal. But there is an episode early on where Beth, my character, is in the hospital. And that was a scene that they wanted me to audition with. And again, I had no context. I didn't have the full screenplay. And I didn't know it was a vertical. I didn't know how verticals work. So I, looked pretty bad. I mean, she's in the hospital. I wore a nightgown that literally belonged to my grandmother. Because I didn't have actual scrubs or they're not scrubs, but like a hospital gown. My hair was a wreck. I don't think I had really any makeup on. So when I found out with the vertical lifestyle, it was like, oh yeah, they want you pretty no matter what, basically. But anyway, I submitted, they responded to it, and then I had and I think at that point I still didn't know it was a vertical. I then had a chemistry read with an actor who was meant to play Matthew. And then I found out I booked it, and I said, look, if you can do a SAG contract for me, I'll do it. And they agreed. And then I can tell you a little bit more, or I can stop there. There was something.
No, keep going. We want more.
This was sort of funny, and I think I can say this because it wasn't, there wasn't any kind of falling out. The actor that I had my chemistry read with, he'd already booked the job, and they were testing him with me. And so I assumed when I went to my fitting that this guy was going to be there and I'd get to meet him. And I asked about him, and they said, oh no, he had to pull out. And I was going, well, who's playing Matthew? So then they say some Teague. I'm like, who's Teague? What kind of name is Teague? So I actually grew up with a guy named Teague, but different spelling. And so I thought, well, God, I hope I have chemistry with this guy. I mean, it obviously all worked out, and then some, but it was just sort of a funny experience. And that was that. And I got to tell you, I had such a good time on this. Really, really wonderful time.
So we have to talk about, obviously, the story, because this is a vertical drama channel. So I'm of a certain age, as you can tell. I'm in my 40s, and obviously quite a lot of the friends that I speak to online are the 40s. And this was kind of a rallying call for women in their 40s, I feel.
Yeah.
Because you watch Verticals and you're like, okay, Kyle Colton's husband, I mean, I love him, he's brilliant, but his character's awful. But then I think about quite a lot of the ex-husbands I know, and I'm like, oh, it's not that bad, really.
Oh,
This is the thing. He's like, he's not that bad. I know worse.
Scary. Okay.
So, but what's fantastic in this, and you possibly weren't aware of this because obviously you're new to Verticals, is that Verticals often have a female character who's quite put upon and doesn't really stand up for herself, and it's very much reliant on the male character, swooping in. And so I think what obviously as fans, we were like, well, we kind of would like a bit more.
Yeah.
And so that's what people loved in this, because it's Kate. Well, not Kate, sorry, Beth, in my head, Kate, who turns the tables, because you take back the company. And you have some amazing lines. I think one of my favourite is when she says about having an X-ray to see if you can find a spine in there.
Oh, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
That was really good. But just everything, so even like the fact, like in the meeting with all the very old shareholders.
Shareholders,
And basically you're like down with patriarchy. And they're trying to do that, little woman. And you're like, no.
Moment.
Is that must have been really fun just to get to play that with some of those lines.
Yeah, and to your point, you're right. I wasn't aware of what most of the storylines were because I hadn't any exposure before this. But there were people on set who kept saying to me, "This is so great to see a character, a female lead, who takes charge and fights back." And they kept saying most of them don't get that opportunity. I didn't know that this was sort of a novelty, but I think had she not done that, what's the point in the role? Quite honestly, I mean, there's zero arc for one, but also then am I sort of, feeding into that dynamic where women are submissive and don't have a backbone? That I don't want to perpetuate that, So it was great fun, I will say, to have some of those moments as she turns the corner and gets her mojo back and starts taking charge and saying, it's great.
I also want to ask, what was it like working with Kyle Colton? Because obviously he's done a huge amount of Verticals. I mean,
Sorry, with who?
Kyle Colton, so the guy who plays your ex-husband.
I thought you said something else.
So obviously he's done a huge amount of Verticals, so he's played all sorts. He's played every character. How was that? Because it felt like there was quite a lot of trust there that you could both really go for each other.
Yeah.
I think to be able to both of you unleash it and sort of feel safe to do that, because it makes it more fun as a viewer that neither of you are holding back and like, I can't stand you and I can't stand you either.
Well, I will say this: he is exceptionally kind and sweet in real life. So he's the antithesis of the Robert character. Very easy to work with. And you're right. To my knowledge, he's done a ton of these. We talked about that. And so he was really comfortable in this universe and really understood how things worked. Quite honestly, watching him with Rebecca, there was a moment, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's towards the end of this, if you haven't seen it, and they're going at it, so angry with each other, and that was so much fun to watch. They're both such funny, broad villains. It's great. And I think I felt lucky because I trusted him, and so I felt very safe, playing those moments, even when he's kind of aggressive with her. I think sometimes, if I'm being totally honest, because of some of the dialogue and the just the nature of how dramatic it is, I broke a little bit. It wasn't always easy for me to keep it together, and I found it. And you're also deliriously tired because you're working nonstop, so that doesn't help. But no, we had a really good time, and he's a doll. He's a sweet, lovely man.
And then there's another storyline in it, which again, you're probably not so aware, but for us as Vertical fans are like, wow, this is progress, which is the whole storyline with Beth, Matthew and Luca.
Yeah.
Which, because it's something that fans are kind of campaigning for, more kind of representation of just everything in Verticals. And it's actually surprisingly nuanced for Vertical and well handled, particularly the final scenes. Did you like kind of the storyline? Did you like what they did with that? Because I thought it was well done.
Yeah, I thought.
Without trying to give too much away.
No, I know. Trying to, how do I say this? I thought it was a nice reveal, right? And also, it explained, I think, a lot of Luca's moodiness and angst and unhappiness. There was somebody years ago that I worked with, and I remember her saying her brother's gay, and I remember her saying that before he came out, he was really just prickly all the time and crabby, and she never really could understand why. And when he eventually came out, his mood changed. It was like, suddenly he was a different person because he was finally living his truth and he wasn't suppressing all this feeling and harboring all this stuff. And so I think they did a nice job of that, allowing that to happen for the Luca character. And I will say, the scene, I'm trying not to give too much away, but the scene with the three of us on the couch when he tells me what's going on, Alex Matthews, who plays him, was so committed and did such a wonderful job and was so present and raw. It really was, it's like, God, good on you. He really brought it, and that made that moment, I think, I haven't seen that yet. I have to pay for that. But in the moment, it felt like we were all very connected because it felt so real and raw. So yeah, they should be having storylines like that. I think we need more of that. Art is responsible, I think, for a lot of our evolution, and our progression as people. So.
Okay, I want to clip that and tell everyone art is responsible for evolution, because yes, it's a battle sometimes in Verticals, to be fair. I mean, if you look at my Instagram page, you'll see it's a battle, but we will get there. Part of it is bringing in people like you. So so now obviously I want to talk about Beth and Matthew.
Yeah.
Because this is the other storyline that's obviously great, because again for Verticals it's more developed in that they actually have a relationship together, because sometimes like the whole storyline is just waiting for them to get together, or they get together at the beginning and then it's all pulled apart and waiting to get together. You actually see them like as a couple having fun. So I need to talk about the hats. What was happening with those hats?
The hats.
How come you got a really good hat and Matthew's got like a lace bonnet, and you had like quite a cool kind of like oh god, what's it called? Like futuristic hat thing going on. Well, yours was better. You rocked yours.
Yeah, you know what happened? We actually, first of all, we had a fabulous set designer, and he and his associate did such a terrific job with all the props, all the set design, and so he provided all these really great finds from flea markets and things he'd collected himself too. I don't think they were just props that he'd rented. And when we were rehearsing, part of it, Silvana, our director, just said, all right, just sort of, let's try some riffing and improvising, and you guys can sort of, look at the items, try some on, maybe put them on each other. And so Teague selected mine and I selected his, and I thought it just worked out perfectly, and it sort of added to the like rom-com of it, I guess.
You did better in that one. You look good. I'm not going to mention how Teague looked.
You don't like him in a little Bo Peep sort of.
I mean, it's interesting, shall we say?
Yeah, I don't think that's normally his look, but it made me laugh, so it worked.
Yeah, very fun. But then the other thing as well is there's obviously this great, which again you might not be aware, but the ending is fantastic.
Oh.
Because
normal, right?
Normally it would all be tied up in a bow at the end. I'm going to say this because I don't think this ruins too much, but basically he proposes at the end because he is a Formula One star and he's won his race and has a really tiny trophy, and then proposes. But the best thing is Beth's rather like, oh, no, I'll be a wife. She's like, I don't need to get married. We don't need to get married. Let's live our lives. And honestly, I think that's when everyone already liked it. And I think that's when basically everyone punched the air and are kind of, yes.
Aww.
Because, of course,
Yeah.
that character would not jump into marriage. And also I know this because I know these women, because a lot of them are my friends. They don't want to do that. They want to live their lives. Yeah. But you know that they'll be together and be really happy. Mm-hmm. So it was just wonderful. What was it like working with Teague?
Miserable. No. Yeah, he is a doll, and like I started to say to you, I thought it was going to be another actor until the fitting, and we didn't meet until set because he's based in New York and I'm based in Los Angeles, so I didn't meet him until day one. We did have a conversation on the phone, and I think he would attest to this. I immediately felt connected to him, and this safety and trust, just this implicit rapport that you can't really manufacture. Like, it just felt really easy. He is so professional. He's such a gentleman. I said to him at the end, I said, your mom's really raised you well, because he really, we were shooting at late hours and sometimes in the rain, and I'm in these mini skirts and no jacket, and he always took care of me. And I think the best thing I can say is I felt very safe with him. I really trusted him, and we also, in between setups, we laughed so hard. So we'd have these like intense moments and, so dramatic. And then we'd be, talking about Caddyshack and The Naked Gun. And at one point we both have, I'm pretty irreverent and, like I say, kind of like a frat boy. I've got like kind of a disturbed sense of humor and sort of a tomboy. And he and I were laughing about something. He's like, okay, great. We're both teenagers. Great. Like, we both could laugh about the same stuff. So it was really easy. I loved working with him. And I even said to him, I don't think I can do this without you ever again. He was my first, and so I'm not his, but he set the bar high, I will tell you that.
So then it comes out, and then obviously you suddenly get a whole new audience of people like me going, hello, let's talk to you. What has that been like, sort of seeing the reaction since it's coming out and sort of a new people discovering you?
Yeah, it's really, to me, it feels like going into some kind of underground world that I didn't know existed, right? So the morning that it came out, I woke up to a text from Teague about it, actually, and he mentioned you to me in that text. And he said something like, get ready for, not with you, he said... all of it was very...
It was a warning.
No.
So
he sung your praises and, said the nicest things about you. But he just said, get ready for sort of the craziness of this world. And it's really interesting. I think what I am the most pleasantly surprised by and a bit taken aback by is how there is this large population of people that are really invested in these and really committed to them and follow all the actors and these different storylines. Because I wasn't aware of verticals until so recently, and again, this was my first one, it's really a whole new world to me. But it's also really cool, and I think, quite honestly, Jen, it's like there's so much sadness and violence and upset in our world right now, and I can say certainly in the United States, there's a lot of, I'm trying to speak diplomatically. It's bumpy.
Does it help? I would say that what there is there's a lot of division in the world.
Tremendous division.
And you feel, in the way that I don't remember when I was younger.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's division between generations, division between opinions, division between solutions. It feels very, very divided and
very much so. Yeah. Very much so. And I think to that end, people need art more than ever, and they need probably a sense of escapism more than ever. So I think verticals must provide that. And I get this even for myself when I have a pretty busy full schedule. And so whether I'm auditioning and then coaching and then taping, or I'm about to start another gig, or I'm rehearsing, sometimes at the end of the day, I'll read one chapter of my book and then I want to just check out, because you get sort of overstimulated and overloaded, and that's not even factoring in the news, which is very, very heavy right now. So thank God these exist, then it's like a spoonful of sugar,
Yeah, I mean, that's my theory about why they're so popular, because everyone I talk to around the world, from China to Australia to, Sri Lanka, Brazil, everyone's like, the world feels harder, daily life is really tough. I need a dopamine hit, I want to check out. Also, I think the appeal is people do want that slightly higher stakes. They want to see good overcome bad. So I always talk about, I used to watch Hallmark more, which I think, their escapism, I don't think they hit the spot anymore because there's not high enough stakes and they've all become the same thing. So it's like, that's not really relatable now, that lovely town where everyone's getting on and, the biggest drama is whether the tree lights up. It's like that's too far removed from reality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas I think there's more satisfaction of actually, I want to watch something and I want to see the good people overcome the bad and the bad people get a comeuppance, and that it fits in an hour and a half and then I can move on with my life. So I think and then I think the other key appeal is just the speed and the volume of them. Because if you think about like a favourite actor at the cinema or an actress, say Kate Blanchett, and she works a lot, that's still maybe 2 projects a year if you're lucky. Whereas verticals, if you you've got, I think Teague's had 5 out and about the past 2 months.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing as well. It's like there's more content and you're not waiting for that, obviously the length of a Hollywood movie. And I know that means that there's a reduction in the quality to a degree, but
Sure.
But then the other thing I would argue, sorry, you've got me on my soapbox now. Sorry, Kate, I'm going to take over. Is I also think there's pressure situations sometimes force more creativity. Mm-hmm. Because I know that a lot of actors say they would like more takes, but I think, actually when you've just got 1 or 2 takes and you just got to deliver, sometimes it's almost you can get stymied when there's too much choice. It's almost paralysing. There's so many different ways I could do this. I could try this. I could bring this in. And now it's like, you have this and you have to make it work. And I think that's where some of the magic is, so that the result that some of these like phenomenal, your performance, there's some brilliant bits in this, the storyline that's pulled together in what, probably it's less than 10 days, wasn't it, the shoot? I think it's incredibly amazing.
What is incredibly amazing? Just how fast
Just the fact that the quality of that vertical that you're in, the performances that you've got and everything, and I'm sure it was less than 10 days the shoot, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were 7 or 8 days, yeah.
Yeah, so I just think it's phenomenal.
That's nice of you to say. It was very fast. And but to your point, you're right that there's something. I mean, I'm at fault. I could do 8,000 takes and run something 8,000 times and never really tire of it and never get on top of it. And so there is something nice about, well, let's just, you can't save it up. You kind of just gotta go for it. And if it doesn't land, then you keep moving and you just have to trust the process. But you're right, there's something freeing about that, And I think too, just in terms of how quickly the content moves and that people can stream it and watch so many so quickly, it also caters to, I think, kind of the lack of attention span a lot of us have, So, but it works for verticals because you can just keep moving.
I have to tell you a thing, because this is really interesting, because I've been interviewed by press a bit and they do say, does it show that we haven't got any attention span whatsoever? And I've talked to quite a few fans about this, and they say if they were watching something on the television, they'll also have their phone out. So they're probably fiddling with their phone while the TV's on.
Yeah.
If they're watching vertical, they're watching it on their phone. So actually they're more focused because they're not fiddling with the phone, because they're watching the vertical.
That's really interesting.
So in an odd way, it's actually slightly improving the attention span.
Aha.
I know.
Look at you blowing my mind.
I know, because that's the thing, because that's the thought of like, yeah. I mean, what it does do is I think it means, because of the amount of them, it means that the attention span there's probably not that willingness to sit with something for a bit of length of time. because there's so many. Like if it's not hit me in like 30 seconds, I'm on to the next one. So I think there is an argument there about attention span.
Right.
But once you are hooked, then I would argue that
Yeah.
slightly better for focusing you. So there you go. That's what I'm here for.
But I love it. It's expanding my mind on and why we need this maybe.
So going forwards, what do you have coming up? Can we look forward to seeing you on our screens again soon? Will you be doing theatre?
Yeah, I have a theater gig coming up. I had my table read for it yesterday. It's part of the Hollywood Fringe Festival, which happens annually here. And I get to play a Brit. Yeah, which will be very fun for me. And it's wildly different from Beth Hart. She is, well, actually, to be fair, she has an alter ego who's a French spy because she's desperate for excitement and danger in her life. So that's not entirely different. But the actual character, Maya, is a mother and divorced and a Brit and much more sort of reserved and held. So I get to play opposite ends of the spectrum. And it's very much in the vein of kind of like Monty Python and A Fish Called Wanda. It's very silly and over the top and a bit raunchy at times. And then I found out today that I booked an indie film that I'm really happy I got because I really love the script. Yeah, and that shoots in New York. Yeah, so I'll go to New York, but that's a few months out. So thank you. I have both of those lined up. Oh, and I thought I have a day of shooting on another indie that I'm trying to figure out the dates for because it will kind of overlap with this play. Yeah, it's busy right now, which is nice. But I would love to do another vertical. I really would. And I mean this. I laughed so hard on that set, and I probably said this, but it's worth saying it. Everybody was so professional, kind, delightful, fun, funny. It was really overall like a very, there's things I would like to adjust in how things are shot, and maybe there's room to talk about that, but it was such a terrific experience overall. I would absolutely do one again.
That's brilliant to hear. Can I just ask you a few final quick questions just to get Kate's opinion? What would you say is the one play, if people get a chance to see on stage, they should go and see?
Wait, say that again? The what play?
One play. So like a play that like, if there's a production of this, you should really go and try and see it. Or you can say 2 or 3, because I know one's like choosing between children. So
Okay.
say a few.
There's, you know what I did an iteration of that I think is a terrific play, and you should see it if it's put up anywhere, is Almost Maine by John Cariani. It's such a great play. It's funny and moving and romantic and fantastical. It's really a terrific play. I would see that. Something else I saw, my grandmother, who I was very close to, was very much, her husband, my grandfather, was a character actor and a theater actor, and so she was very much in that world and a huge art buff and film buff and all the things. And she, when I was a teenager, got me tickets to see Doubt. And this was I think it was at the Amundsen, if I remember correctly, in Los Angeles, and Cherry Jones was the lead, she's a terrific actress. If you don't know her, you're an actor, you should check out her stuff. But that's a wonderful play. And then, let me think if there's one more. This is kind of like, I don't know why I thought about this play in a while, but I remember seeing it when I was also a teenager, which was the Vagina Monologues. And it's really good. It's really good.
They used to be on all the time in London.
I know. Yeah, and I don't
know what's happened. I don't think they're on at the moment. They need a revival.
Absolutely. It's so, I remember just as a teenager thinking this is so, and I wasn't working as an actor yet, and it was so well done, and they always pulled in really terrific actresses. So right now, there's so many. My favorite play is probably, I love Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I love August Osage County. an excellent play. Yeah, you don't.
This is
I'm
what we
gonna.
need because we're educating, we're learning. And then my final question is just who are the actresses with us or not with us anymore that are like
Oh my
I love
God.
I love it. So
Diane
you can name as
Wiest.
many as you like.
I have so
Yeah.
many. Yeah, Diane Wiest is. I dreamt about her last night. Oddly, she's one of my favorite actresses. I love Kate Blanchett. I love Kathy Baker. I love Meryl Streep. I love. Oh my God! Do you want me to keep going? I
Let's
could
keep
keep going.
going. Keep
Yeah.
going.
I love. I'm a huge Kate Winslet fan. I love Patricia Clarkson. Oh my God, there's so many and so many. I mean, I could also give you like performances to watch. I could talk about this for
Yeah.
so long. You're gonna have to tell me to be quiet. But and then actors, there's a zillion. Also, I love Regina King. I love Mercedes Ruehl. Let's talk about Big. So she plays his mother, and there's a movie called The Fisher King. I think it came out in like the late '80s. She is
That's a
so
good movie.
oh, it's so good. I love that you know that. Everyone's great in it, but she is really her performance of that is incredible. Oh my God. Oh, you know who is so good, and I just watched it recently, so it's fresh, is British actress in Adolescence who plays Stephen Graham's wife. I think is it Christine DeMarco? I think is her last name.
Yeah, sounds right. Yeah.
She is so good, so good. And I would tell you, like, if you're looking for an amazing dramatic performance, if you've never seen To Leslie, Andrea Riseborough, another Brit, it's quite possibly the best dramatic performance I've ever seen. It's truly seamless. It's unbelievable.
And what's really interesting is, I would say, one of the common threads about all the actresses you named are they're people who've managed to carve out a career of starting young, but have managed to keep interesting roles and grow and develop with their roles and just show women at different stages of life. So, yeah,
Yeah,
there's some
I love
amazing names there. Yeah.
I think, there is, it's interesting because this whole storyline with the vertical I was in has so much to do with age and an age gap and women of a certain age. And yeah, there's things about it I wish differently, maybe about my skin from when I was in my early 20s or something. But on the whole, I think women get way sexier, generally speaking, and way more self-possessed and confident as they age. And so, I mean, at least I know in my experience, like, I feel like on my insides, I feel as good as I've ever felt about myself. And I think that does come with age and experience, but also from an acting standpoint, the vast majority of actresses that I look up to and give the juiciest, most nuanced, interesting, raw performances, they're not 25. And that's not to disparage 20. There's incredible young actors, but those roles that you get when you're over 35, and all those women, that none of them are that I named are spring chickens, so.
Well, thank you for bringing that to Verticals. We very much
Yeah.
appreciate you for doing that. And just, yeah, thank you so, so much for your time. I really appreciate you shared so much with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. You're so lovely, as Teague said, and very bright, and I would do this anytime with you. And thank you for the support. You're really sweet.